start with this again now. You're going to be able to see
All
me.
right, that's it. Thank you, Anna. I'm going to go ahead and mute you again, honey, and appreciate the feedback.
Okay, anytime.
Yes, yes. I'm just going to hide my webcam, everybody. So here I am. I'm going to scroll through real fast here so you can see this. All right. All righty. So there is this one, and I thought that this, there, I'll have that one out of the way
Yeah,
for you.
that's perfect, Kim.
All right, so now you can see me. So now back to that beginning, you can see my webcam, the picture of me, and you can see my screen. And if you go click your mouse between the two, you should be able to enlarge and reduce whatever you want to see. You might need to play around with it a little bit. And you can move my little webcam. You can move me on the top, bottom, sides, wherever you would like to put it. So here was the screen about our Astrology Reincarnation and Soul Conference that we have coming up. Again, I will show this screen later on. Probably the most biggest thing that you want to recognize is the early bird discount is going through July 31st. And this will get you into an entire week of people. There will be more speakers that are added on, and I'm pretty excited to have Robert Gover come and be a special guest with us on the real money portion of the webinar. I've been speaking to him over the last 3-4 months, and what a beautiful soul he is, and so knowledgeable about the history of astrology and money and choices that we have coming up for us. So most of the webinar lectures, such as this one, will be on the themes of real money and lasting love. There's my Jupiter in Cancer that says July or June 26, 2013 to July 16, 2013. Now that's supposed to be 2014. So miss that little detail. So as you see that, just know, again, it's going to be a whole year. There's the Jupiter archetype. So this is the screen I was on, and so you're all caught up now with everything. And so again, Jupiter is that principle of growth and expansion, and if Jupiter didn't run into Saturn, it'd keep going into outer space. So there's a very unique planetary pair between Jupiter and Saturn, and I'll speak to that a little bit later in the podcast as we start to get into some of the aspects that Jupiter will be making over the next year in Cancer. It's quite active with all of the outer planets, as it typically is. So this archetype of Jupiter, this principle of growth and understanding, it's always about making sense of our universe. It's making sense of what's around us in the world. The opposite archetype of Jupiter on the zodiacal wheel is Mercury, Gemini in the third house. And that archetype is where we want to apply labels to everything and to be able to classify all the little details and the facts and get them all put together and make all sense of them. So Mercury and Jupiter on the zodiacal wheel is left brain, right brain. Jupiter as that principle of expansion, it wants to expand to the point that it can understand anything and everything and make sense of it. We start out with doing it from our own perspective, and as we move through life, we'll learn how to broaden that into larger and larger perspectives until we get to what evolutionary astrology calls universal, timeless principles and understandings. But let's take a moment here and talk about Jupiter as it relates to our intuition, our sixth sense, or what we will call the right brain. The whole concept of our intuition is when we get a knowing that all of a sudden we recognize something and we don't quite know how we know it. It's not like we can take our pen and paper and go 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. Something just popped into our consciousness and oh my gosh, wow, I never recognized that before. What this archetype of Jupiter does is it taps into the larger forces and energies in the universe. Some people might say it taps into the Akashic records, but it's tapping into energy, consciousness beyond what our brain, the left brain, the analytical, logical brain, can piece together. And so Jupiter, as our sense of intuition, is sometimes called that sixth sense, because it goes beyond those five physical senses of sight, hear, taste, smell, and whatever the other one is. And so that sixth sense then is that gut reaction inside of us that we get these big ahas about. Now, what's happened with so much of human conditioning on the planet is we've been taught to deny or suppress that intuition and that sixth sense. We've been taught that we need some intermediary, like a teacher, a guru, or a priest, or a minister, or somebody who knows more than us to tell us what is truth or not. And yet Jupiter is an archetype that operates on that conscious level. That is how we may know whether or not something is a truth for us. And as we learn to really work with this archetype of Jupiter, including Sag in the 9th house, and learn to trust our own intuition, that intuition starts to work with all the other five senses, and the hair raises up on the back of our neck, or we just go through some type of other physiological response that just gives us the chills. You can name them. That's how we start to know that our own senses are speaking to us beyond that left brain, beyond that rational, I just want to throw it all to pieces because I've been taught to know it another way. I still hear you every once in a while, Leroy, okay, honey? Little.
Okay, gotcha.
Did you mute? Maybe he muted himself. You might want to mute once in a while, just for a little bit. And I will stop. And, well, let's do this, Leroy. If people have questions as we're going along, how would you like them to ask questions? Should they type them in? Do you want to
How about raising your hand on their control panel, on their little pane?
That's this thing right over here that I've got my mouse on right here, everybody. This right here is the control panel, and you click it and it shows up, and right here is where you can type messages, where I've got my mouse. Well, right there you can type messages, and Leroy will have to work with some settings to see if it works for everybody.
You can actually also actually type a question in, and I can respond privately or relay it to Kim Marie for an answer for the group. So either by raising your hand, like Carolyn Perkins did you want to take a question, Kim, to test the capability?
Sure, let's do it, because I just want to be able to test it.
Okay, Carolyn, go ahead.
Oh, I was just playing with it. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Oh, not at all.
No. No, you're fine. You're fine. Sorry.
That's good. That's good.
I don't see the place where you type a question though.
That's okay. Go to.
I will show you. Show you. It's right down here. We're at the bottom of my screen. When you open up this is your grab handle or whatever that's called. Right down here where my mouse is playing is where you can type a question if you have one.
Oh, okay, great.
And Leroy's going to be the intermediary, because I'll get distracted if I've got 50 zillion questions going here, and my little Pluto Virgo will get all excited. So I'm trying to concentrate on what I want to share with everybody.
Sure. I think it might be best for Kim just to go ahead and use that type a question in under the questions panel on your control panel. I hope it's obvious for everybody. I see a little bit different control panel on my screen, but we can play with that, see if we can find that place to type it in.
And if somebody else has been trying to hear, let me go over one more detail. If somebody else has been trying to hear and you haven't been able to, follow my mouse right here on the screen. This is for people who want to do the webcam and see everything. If you click on this, this is when you want to be audio only and just listen. And if you have come in past the 100th person, I think you are listen only, correct, Leroy?
Kim, that's not a,
Or okay.
that's not necessarily accurate. Under the audio panel, you'll see two choices there. If you called in via a telephone, you would need to select the telephone option to hear the call. Mic and speakers will automatically give you the video if you have a webcam capability on your computer, and you will be using your voice over IP or mic and speakers automatically on your computer. That is the default choice for everybody. So only if you called in on a telephone would you choose the telephone option under the blue panel there that says audio. And the webcam
Okay.
should be automatic if you have the webcam capability on your laptop or desktop computer or device or portable device. So thank you for that housekeeping. I think we can go ahead, Kim, get back to your information, and we'll just hope that the questions are lucid when they're typed into me.
Gotcha. And again, you're gonna need to be quiet, honey. So you might want to mute because your littlest things. All right, everybody. Thank you for letting us go back and forth with all of this information and participating this way for the first time. So back to this archetype of Jupiter, as we are learning to really trust the intuition, trust the gut, get those physiological responses that tell us when that intuition and sixth sense is really working. That is a process by which we are really internalizing our ability to know truth for ourselves versus all of the human-made conditionings that we've had on the planet for the last, what, 8,000-10,000 years, take your pick. And then also just our ability then as we are evolving in this life, as we are maturing, we've got our own ability to know thyself. And that's also a lot of what this Jupiter archetype is all about. Now, the archetype of Jupiter, Sag, and the ninth house also gets to be known as religious or spiritual philosophies. And many of us, from the perspective of evolutionary astrology, if we've been studying it for any length of time, learn that one of the guiding desires and principles and practices of evolutionary astrology is to help us understand natural spiritual laws and principles which are universal, which are timeless. I refer you to this little quote at the bottom of your screen by Jeffrey Wolf Green that you can refer to. The timeless nature of what we will call universal truth is unchangeable. And yet our human-made perceptions of it change by the culture we're born into, by the type of social and religious conditionings that we're born into, by the space and time we come into. And so as we come into this human consciousness and experience the Saturnian space-time thing, we have all of these conditioning factors that are put upon us by society, by our parents, by the country we live in, by the religious or spiritual influences that we have. And again, EA is always working to reveal where there are distortions in that area or where there's limitations. From the perspective of evolutionary astrology, we'll talk about different states of consciousness, the evolutionary states, the three main ones: consensus, individuated, and spirituated. Consensus, approximately 7 out of 10 people. This is where religion operates. People don't recognize anything outside that conditioning factor they were born into, the space, times, and societal, parental, etc. conditionings. Individuating, 2 out of 10. This is where we start to question what is truth for me. And this is where that Jupiter archetype can come alive, because we want to find our own belief system, including going through atheism or no beliefs if necessary for a lifetime or two, as we're expanding in consciousness and getting to that spirituated state, approximately 1 out of 10, where we start to really understand those universal spiritual principles, or what we might call the mystical side of all religions. Now, one of the other things that also comes along with this archetype of Jupiter as one of its most basic is what we'll call the archetype of alienation. And so what we run into in life, all of us on a practical basis, we'll run into somebody who thinks differently than we do. We'll run into somebody who has different beliefs than we do. And sometimes we won't fit into the group. For instance, an example, the souls who are born with Pluto in the ninth house, Pluto is representative of the soul in EA. Many ninth house Plutos will incarnate themselves various lifetimes over different cultures, countries, religions, because of that need to know and expand their understandings of philosophical principles. So any particular lifetime they jump in, there's a natural sense of alienation because they're not repeating the past. They're trying something else different. All of us will have a mini version of that with the Jupiter principle in our chart. Wherever you have natal Jupiter by house, sign, and aspect, that is where you can look to clues to that sense of I don't fit in. And what's the purpose of that sense of alienation? It is to jog that right brain, that intuition, to have you go, why am I different? Why do people think different than I do? Why are their beliefs different than mine? Why is their culture different than mine? What's it all mean? And then on deeper levels, where are the unifying principles underneath the differences? So Jupiter and its polarity, Mercury with its rulership of Gemini in third house, this is the polarity of the zodiac that becomes known as truth versus lies, or being our authentic self versus compensating on who we really are, or trying to be more than we really are. Those are those cookbook words that you hear, exaggerations, compensations. This is all the Jupiter stuff that I've kind of jotted down here on the screen for you. Again, we go through that alienation, that sense of not belonging, to get to the deepest part of ourselves and to get to our deepest beliefs and understandings, so that we can then work to become authentically who we are in the midst of all the diversity on the planet. And as you have that evolution or expansion of consciousness with Jupiter, eventually you start to understand that all of us in our differences can still all be in integrity, and we can all have our own path home or universal source, whatever your languaging is, or God, Goddess, or the totality of consciousness. So this is some of the basics of this archetype of Jupiter, and of course we could talk forever on it, but I'm just trying to touch into a few key archetypes for you that we'll explore now over this next hour. So now what I want to do is just very briefly is familiarize you with the Cancer archetype. And then we're going to blend these together. And so Cancer is the fourth sign of the zodiac. It relates to the moon, which is its ruler, and it relates to the fourth house as well. And when we start to work with Cancer, we see, first thing, that it is passive polarity, cardinal modality, and the element of water. Now, the passive polarity, active, passive, energy moving outward, energy moving back to center. Cardinal, initiation. Just think about that archetype. Passive, cardinal, passive, cardinal, passive, cardinal. Can you see how water goes everywhere from this? Can you see how the archetype of Cancer has these two distinct emotional cycles to it, withdrawal and animation. And we get triggered by something emotionally so that we can go in and figure out the source of what's triggering us, so that we can learn to understand ourselves better emotionally, so we can figure out what the trigger is from our childhood, from past life memory popping up into consciousness. What drew us in emotionally? What's the source of it? Once we figure it out, we process through it emotionally. We hopefully are working to heal it, and we flip over into that other emotional cycle, which is animation. Then we want to emote with somebody. We want to share. We want to go through it. And as we go back and forth through those two emotional cycles all the time, what we're working ourselves towards is what we call emotional self-reliance. And that means that we are learning to be responsible for our own emotions under any and all circumstances. Doesn't matter what type of relationship you have going on, whether you're married or not, whether you're whatever. Details don't matter. It means that as we go through the maturation process to become adult, Capricorn polarity to Cancer, we and only we are responsible for our emotional needs. And what happens then, as we go through all this emotional processing and we grow up and we start to mature, and we hopefully, as we're moving further and further along at recognizing, oh, I'm responsible for making myself happy, we learn to have an internalization of our security needs. When we are looking for security outside of ourselves, it's the job, it's the partner, it's whatever else out there, then we give our security away to outside of ourselves. And so this is a real big one right now through this Jupiter in Cancer, because this Jupiter archetype again, what do we find ourselves always working with? We're always looking for the teacher, the guru, the religious or spiritual authorities. And if we are insecure, then we're going to be giving our power away to those types of religious or spiritual or knowledgeable healers outside of ourselves. And I think one of the biggest things we're going to be looking at with Jupiter in Cancer is the evolution of emotional security. Now, I'll come back to this, all right? I'll come back to this screen. I want to work a little bit more with this Cancer archetype. So as you can see here, we go through all of these various cyclical processing of emotions. Name every type of emotion that you have, every type of feeling that you have, and it's all going to come down to withdrawal, animation, and the processing of emotions to deepen our internalization of security. The other thing that will come through this Cancer archetype is the early environmental conditionings, all of our parental issues with our early environment. And if we have the support of one or two parents with helping us learn how to process and internalize our emotional needs and our inner security, then we are going to build up what we call a healthy self-image or ego on an emotional level. If we do not have the parental support in our environment, then any of our parental insecurities that we are born into, our parents' insecurities, many, many times, what happens? How many of us say, I'm never going to be like my mom and dad when I grow up, and we reach 40 and we're going, oh God, I'm just like my mother. So we very often pass along all of the conditionings on an emotional level to our children. And when we are being brought up at a young age and all we want to do is be loved, we will allow ourselves to be conditioned in order to be loved. If we have a parent who just says, shut up, we're going to learn to shut up and stuff our emotions because we want to be loved. We don't know any better. So that Cancer archetype has a lot to do with what our early environment was like. And so many of us now, participating in a call like this, just right off the bat can think of how our early conditioning environment was and how we've been trying to decondition from it ever since. How we're still in process of trying to decondition from that. Maybe one of us came through, or maybe we came through with one healthy parent, or one parent healthier than the other. So there were some more positive examples in really learning how to meet our emotional needs. But for most of us, at the end of these 2,000 years of the Piscean Age, I mean, we've been taught to separate spirit and flesh by all the great religions of the Piscean Age, that we've been doing it for lifetimes. So one of the things that we really want to be most gentle with for ourselves is to allow ourselves to have all of these emotions that come bubbling up to the surface. It's not about stuffing the emotions. The healing at the end of the Piscean Age is bringing the flesh and spirit back together. And the flesh is the senses. It's the physical and emotional body. And that emotional body can many times be part of that sixth sense and intuition as well. And then the spirit is the spiritual and mental bodies, and they have so much energy at being able to override the senses that this is something else that we will be working to do with Jupiter in Cancer, is learning to honor those senses and those emotions again. Now, the Cancer archetype also brings about with its polarity Capricorn, brings about gender issues. And many times when you learn to become a practicing astrologer and you're working with the chart of a client, you will look to the Cancer Capricorn house cusp. You'll look to Pluto or the nodes in Cancer Capricorn or fourth house and Pluto. And that's where we'll start to search for maybe some gender switching that has recently gone on in most recent past lives, or we may be approaching the need for that. Those issues will also come up. The big example in that regard is the fact that Pluto in Capricorn, I'm going to try and keep track of my time here. I will try to be done with everybody by 8 o'clock, so I thank you very much for listening here. Pluto in Capricorn, its polarity is Cancer, its lessons are Cancer. Just look at the gender issues and the switch that we have had with the gay issues in the United States in just the last 4 or 5 years of Pluto in Cancer. Nobody ever thought we'd see any of that type of thing going on. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later on, but Jupiter in Cancer will bring up a lot of those gender issues, the conversations about it, questioning where am I in regards to that. And because Jupiter is that principle of expansion, we could see a wave of people, perhaps even the younger people, going, well, I think I'm gay. I think I'm gay. And from my personal perspective as an evolutionary astrologer, it's not even judging it. It's just going, well, why don't you just check it out and see where you're at and be curious about it and go back and forth. You know, I think one of the biggest things we have to do with Jupiter is to let go of judgments, let go of wanting that right or wrong. My God's better than your God, my religion's better than yours, my belief system's better than yours. We need to throw that away and allow people to feel their way through their beliefs and where they're at with their beliefs right now, and then how those beliefs feel in regards to their gender assignment, regardless of what gender they were born into in this particular lifetime. Now, something else that's very closely related to this whole issue of insecurity versus inner security is that if we either have a healthy enough parental environment where we internalize security, or in our adulthood we've been through the experiences that allow us to internalize that. When we internalize security, one of the deepest things that we are recognizing is the ability to trust ourselves. Regardless of what the conditioning factors are, regardless of what our partner says, our parents, children, friends, bosses, doesn't matter. Regardless of what they say out there, if we're learning to trust self in here. And self-trust is one of those deepest archetypes of Cancer. Because if we can't trust ourselves, then we can't trust anything or anybody else out there. And so if we don't have self-trust, we don't trust the environment. That environment out there becomes scary, even as an adult. Another thing that Jupiter will want to work with. So when we are working with the trust issue and we have not internalized trust, then we're going to want to control that environment in order for Cancer to feel safe. Now, I don't need to tell anybody that, you know, that Cancer archetype is extremely sensitive and they wear it on their sleeve. And anybody who knows somebody with a lot of Cancer in their chart know that cycle of withdrawal and animation that we go through all the time. And so many times, again, the degree to which you've got to control everything in your environment, in your world, is a reflection as to how good you are with your self-trust issues. And as you see working down that list, one more thing, emotional denial does not equal emotional security or self-reliance, or that you're done working on any of your emotional issues. Sometimes that Cancer archetype either goes into emotional denial, emotional suppression, or isolation. I'm fine. I'm fine. Well, how's your social life? I don't have a social life, don't need one. You see the sense that you sense what I'm saying here. Again, denial or suppression of the emotions is not healthy expression of the emotions, nor is it emotional self-reliance or inner security. So that polarity to the Cancer archetype, Capricorn, self-responsibility under any and all circumstances. We're responsible for our own emotional needs under any and all circumstances. Then we can build up that inner security and that self-trust. And then we recognize that whatever's happening out here, we're somehow connected to it. So what do I have to honor in here on an emotional level if I want to change something out there? I want to change the outer world, change the inner world. And one of the places where we really sometimes really have to put an effort in is on the emotional level. I'm going to move on, take a drink. I hope this is working for everybody. And Leroy, is there any questions that I should answer or anything? You can remain silent if there isn't.
Okay. No, there are a few questions on the board, but I do want to remind our attendees that it might be best to ask general questions that's for the benefit of the whole group rather than personal chart questions, even though we'll be open to that at the right time, perhaps through personal consultation. So no, you're clear. I've been answering a few on some of the logistics and technical stuff, and I think we can move on unless you want to do one of our polls now. Should we?
Sure.
So let's see if this works for us, group. I'm going to launch a poll here, and everybody should be able to see that. How would you describe your level of astrology expertise out there? We have a large group tonight, so we're very interested to know from what perspective we all come. So thank you for taking some time to submit your answer.
I'll open up and see if my stuff is showing. Okay, I'm not. That must be you, honey.
Can you see the poll on your screen, by the way, Kim Marie?
I didn't when I opened it up, but that's okay. I don't need to get distracted by anything, okay?
Sure.
I'll just keep working. I'll give you all a little tidbit. We had 275 people register for this free Jupiter in Cancer webinar. I don't remember, at about 200, I cut Leroy off and I says, I don't want to know. I'm nervous already. All my emotions are going. And then finally, about a half hour before the call, I says, okay, give me the number. That's why we had the technical difficulties. We switched our we switched our subscription from 100 people to 500 people. But at 500, my webcam or the webcam doesn't show because they're in some beta testing or something. But so anyway, we got it switched back, and I thank each and every one of you for showing up and having an interest with this, and thank you for helping me with my learning curve. I find that once I get talking, I pretty much calm down, and then I just start rattling the information off. But boy, when you got to add technical stuff on top of just your information, it can get a little interesting.
Well, Kim, we're getting about 80% of the attendees have voted. So to keep us on time and to keep moving forward, I'm going to close the poll now.
And share the results with me?
Sure.
I don't see them, so I'll let you just speak.
The attendees certainly can, and it looks like most of the people on the call have been upgrading their knowledge for many years of astrology, so we have a pretty seasoned group for the most part. And thank you for participating in our first quick poll tonight. We'll have one more before the end of the event, so appreciate that.
All right, so those of you who have been reading the screen, Jupiter in Cancer, bottom line, it's the evolution of emotional security. You're going to mute yourself again. Thank you, Leroy. So Jupiter in Cancer, one of its most basic things through the next year is going to be deepening our understanding of what constitutes emotional security for us and what constitutes inner security. And so, I mean, just the fact that Jupiter's going to be in Cancer, Saturn's in Scorpio, Chiron and Neptune are in Pisces. Stay tuned, I got some screens coming up on that. Just that fact alone, to have this many planets going through the water signs, and they'll all be, the outer planets will be in water longer than Jupiter in Cancer. This is going to put a lot of emotional energy there for us. And so everybody's going to be emotionally wired, live wired. And the Jupiter part of this is to really ask those questions. Well, why do I feel this way? What does it mean? Where did these emotions come from? And just asking those types of questions takes that right brain Jupiter archetype, and it opens up your consciousness to understand yourself on emotional levels deeper and deeper. It'll spark memories from childhood. You can have spontaneous past life memories that will come through. There will be these, information will come up on emotional levels, and Jupiter will be working to make sense of it. Oh, that's why I always get triggered when somebody mentions a certain word. It's because my mother used to say it all the time, and every time she'd say that word, I'd go have a panic attack. All kinds of things will start to recognize on emotional levels. Now, because remember when I said earlier that we have those cyclical emotions with Cancer, withdrawal and animation? With Jupiter, it'll go to extremes. Jupiter expands everything, positive and negative. So we personally, everybody in our environment, we can find that everybody is emoting more than they typically do, or everybody even shuts down more than they typically do. And so with ourselves, with others, we're going to have to learn how to be accepting, Jupiter, of people having the emotional cycles all over the place, extreming all over, and just try our best to understand it. One of the things that Jupiter is very good at is having philosophical conversations. Well, why do you feel that way? What do you think is the origin of those feelings and emotions? What is your emotional body teaching you about yourself? When we can start to ask those types of questions, you can ask them inwardly, you can ask them outwardly, and you can Ask and ask and ask until your intuition brings to the surface the information that you need to know from within yourself, or you get the feedback from whoever you're conversing with about why they feel how they're feeling. Remember when I talked about that alienation earlier? Sometimes Jupiter having that alienation from other belief systems in order to get it to learn how to trust its own truth. That's going to take on an emotional flavor with Jupiter in Cancer. There will be many times when we will go through feeling emotional alienation from others in our life, from the coworker to the partner to the kid to the friend to whoever. We'll go through that emotional alienation. And again, to help us reach that deeper level of inner security. Because what we've got to recognize from the Capricorn polarity, job, house, resources, relationships, all that outer stuff out there, it's no substitute for how we feel inside and how we trust ourselves inside. So here's another one. Jupiter in Cancer is learning to feel comfortable in your own skin. Really being able to feel, this is who I am. This is my emotional processing. This is how I do my emotional waves. You know, in our household, we have it all over the place. We have emotional shutdown. We have a lot of water in our household of 3 people. Between Pisces, Cancer, and Scorpio, all 3 of us have all 3 of them. And, you know, somebody will be in a shutdown mode. Somebody will be in exploding mode. And then somebody will just be kind of, you know, emotionally quiet and observing. Or one of us might be going, well, why do you feel that way? And so, again, we're all going to be thrown in, and we're all going to be learning to try and be comfortable with our own emotional body. Now there you can see it start to bring in all those gender and hormonal issues again, comfortable with who we are, no matter how different that might be from what is society's acceptable standards, etc., and just comfortable with feeling. We have anybody who has a lot of air or fire in your chart, it might be a little harder for your charts, your souls, to get a little more comfortable with all that water. But there's definitely an increase in that water element once Jupiter goes into Cancer, and as it's going to be there through that whole year. Just reflect for a minute as we've had Jupiter in Gemini over the last year. You know, the joke has been we've had a year-long Mercury retrograde. And have we talked it over enough? Have we talked it over enough? Can we talk about it one more time? Let me ask you one more time. And, you know, we work with a lot of detail in our household, and I'm very watery. Leroy's quite, you know, he's a 3rd house Pluto, a Gemini soul. And he goes, honey, I already gave you the answer. Didn't you hear me? And I sometimes have to go, okay, I'm in the emotional space right now where I can give you the attention. Tell me one more time, please. And so that fire and air that is in a lot of people's charts, you're going to really have to learn how to be comfortable with feeling. And those of us who have a lot of water in our chart, we might have a little bit of an easier time. There's some beautiful grand trines coming up over the next year, and one of them next month. We might have a little bit of an easier time because we've been in this skin with a lot of emotions for this lifetime, however long it's been. But all of us are going to have to really learn how to feel comfortable with our emotional body and have an acceptance of our emotional body. I mean, you're asking the 6th sense to become emotional and trust that gut as much as you can. Now, the other thing with Jupiter, because it relates to belief systems, is we're going to get very emotional about our beliefs, both positive and negative. So on an individual basis is what feels like truth to me? What do I believe? What does my gut tell me to believe? We will all be very mm, emotionally protective of our beliefs.
Kim?
If you, yes.
I had you're right on a subject here that we had a real interesting question come in from Vicky about this emotional issue of Jupiter and Cancer. Will the moon cycles enhance the Jupiter and Cancer effect, especially with past life and intuition issues? That comes
Oh,
from.
totally. Yes, yes, definitely. Most definitely. And I'll address that a little more Jupiter's going to be in a T-square next year, and it's going to be in a grand trine next year between the 5 outer planets, and I'll go through those and speak to some of those. But oh, most definitely, we will all feel our intuition stronger, and that's why don't suppress the emotions, allow those emotions to flow. I've always said, okay, I was raised in a household where no emotions were acceptable. No emotions. And I was extremely emotional. And I remember being about 8 or 9 years old and my mom telling me big girls don't cry. And I blew up. I blew up and I screamed and yelled at my mother and I said, I'm going to cry if I want to because afterwards I feel better. And she never again told me that big girls don't cry. After that, my dad would say it, but my mom never said it again. And so I came from recognizing through that and through my growing up, there is purpose in negative emotions. They're the barometers. They're the wake-up calls. They're what gets us in touch with what's really going on under the surface. So Jupiter in Cancer, because it will magnify the emotions, it's okay. Sometimes you might want to be alone, or you might want to be with somebody who you can trust or who is okay if you're just up and out all over the place. But feeling the emotion and acting upon the emotion are two different things. And for most of us, if we can just let those emotions out, we spark on what's going on, what's triggering us. And we can bring those past life hits up to the surface with Jupiter and Cancer if we will allow the emotions to flow. Now, again, if you're out in a public setting and you're sitting in a restaurant, it might not be the exact time to start yelling at your husband over what you're pissed off about or whatever. But as much as possible, Jupiter in Cancer is going to be giving ourselves safe space in order to let any and all emotions up and out. And then once we've had the calming down emotionally and the right brain flashes from Jupiter, then we can decide what actions we want to take going forward in a healthier and healthier way. There isn't a one of us who will not have childhood issues come up with Jupiter and Cancer. And if you say, all right, I've already done it 10 zillion times, well, here comes 10 zillion and one. All of us will get flashbacks from childhood that we will go, I mean, it'll be simultaneous. We'll have the memory pop up, and at the same time, Jupiter's going, oh, that's why I'm scared of this, or shut down with that. I just didn't, oh, I forgot about that. Wow. And so we'll get the flashbacks from this childhood, we'll get flashbacks from past lives and go through all of that. All of us, many of us, might be dealing with parental issues with Jupiter and Cancer. Either we have those Pluto in Cancer or Pluto in Leo parents that may be transitioning or needing elder care of some sort, or maybe they are finally open to having conversations with us that they would never have when we were younger. Many of you on the call might be you might be parents and you have issues with your children. We will all revisit the family of origin issues from our childhood and the children we have created. This is going to be a time period to revisit conversations, to revisit everything, and see if you can come to Jupiter better understandings, and perhaps even understand how the other person felt, what they thought, where their beliefs were coming from. Because as many of us in EA know, we don't come in as blank slates. Even our children come in with their own set beliefs through Jupiter by natal sign house aspect. And so yes, going through all of that stuff can be happening, and definitely can be having a lot of flashbacks coming through. And again, it's quite possible that a lot of it will be clairsentient. In other words, we will feel it. We might not always necessarily have a nice conversation pop up. We'll have a memory, we'll have a flashback. In Roger Wolger's deep memory processing work, trauma doesn't come up in an ABC fashion. It is the distinct emotional imprint of something, or a physical imprint, but we can always tell when we have those emotional flashbacks, both good and bad. And just think of the sense of smell. How many times, if you hear a piece of music, or you hear some smell of some plant or some food, and you're taken right back to some memory of something. Jupiter in Cancer will act like that all the time, and it's honoring it. We're going from Jupiter being very analytical and left brain in Gemini to now being very feeling based with Jupiter in Cancer. I keep seeing that 2013 with my Pluto in Virgo. Here's Jupiter's retrograde cycle. Jupiter goes retrograde about 4 months every year. And when Jupiter turns retrograde, well, I went into putting it right in with Jupiter in Cancer. You can see we have a Cancer polarity with this happening. There's going to be an involution process that, in other words, Jupiter retrograde is going to be a time period to quiet down, to meditate, to search, and to really go inward, specifically if we want to reassess anything from our childhood or our days as parenting, or anything from our emotional past that could be wounding for us. Again, if you want to, you can go back to the last time Jupiter was in Cancer, which was 2001, and before that was 1989. You can research back and take some time to feel back to those time periods and see what was going on for you. But the Jupiter retrograde is going to be, with that Cancer polarity, it's going to be very, very important that we are making an effort with that maturation process. Jupiter retrograde in Cancer points to Capricorn. That's the lesson. That's the answer. That's what we're trying to figure out with that retrograde process. So we really want to throw off the emotional immaturities, the insecurities. We want to get to a deeper level of self-trust within ourselves, and then we want to grow up. We recognize that we've got to be responsible for all of our emotional situations. Not only that, we have to be responsible for everything that's in our environment. Again, remember, Cancer will relate to a lot of the early childhood environmental conditionings, especially from our parents, but from our society, from our religion, schooling, friendships, whatever. And anytime we have retrogrades in Cancer, we can revisit that stuff. Jupiter is going to give us 4 months to do it. So it is a time period to go back and go, well, why do I always have to be like this in my environment? Why do I always have to feel like I've got to be secure? Why am I always the one that has to control the home? Why do I have to control where we go eat? Why do I have to control this and that and this and that in order to feel secure? Again, the more you have to control something in your immediate environment, the more that's a sign of the insecurity inwardly. the deeper we build up an inner security. And Jupiter in Cancer, the more we recognize that deep inner connection to source energy directly, then the more we can trust that environment to vibrate and operate in our highest and best good. The more we will then proactively energize into the environment safety, peace, happiness, a sense of all is well in spite of any chaos. So we can really switch a lot of those environmental conditionings during Jupiter's retrograde cycle. And then, of course, you see it's really about evolving past all of the conditioning factors that we've had up to this point. And we're all conditioned. There isn't a one of us who isn't conditioned to one degree or another from, again, the list that I put on the bottom of the screen. And so just take a moment then as you write down each of these. Gender issue may or may not be an issue for you. Again, the expansion of consciousness in the soul is an ability to be able to hold the masculine and feminine sides of ourselves, regardless of what gender we are, to become androgynous, to become whole. And then parental childhood, and of course Capricorn polarity is going to bring in the career, social. Jupiter is going to bring in all the beliefs. So there's a distinct need to throw off all the early conditioning and to grow up with Jupiter's retrograde cycle in Cancer. Moving on, I'm trying to be a little more conscious of time for everybody and work through those. Again, we will post this webinar on our YouTube website. And so you'll be able to go back and listen to this again. And if I'm going to come through some aspects here that are going to be too many to write down. I would just know that you can go back and research this and look this up again. So while Jupiter is in Cancer over this next year, it's going to make 3 aspects each. Saturn, Pluto, Uranus, Chiron, and Neptune. And I'll go over those individually. I'll go over them in just a moment, but what I really want you to see is that over the next year, 3 times we're going to have Jupiter make trines to Saturn and Chiron, and they're going to be in a strong orb of a grand trine most of the year. At the same time, we have a T-square going on with Jupiter between the Uranus and Pluto oppositions. All right? So let's start looking at these individually, but before we do that, I want you to just see here, one of the things that this chart is drawn up for July 17th of 2013, it's next month. On that day, if you can see this right here, Jupiter and Mars will have trines with Saturn and Neptune, and I didn't have time to figure out, I can either put all the asteroids or none. I didn't get my Chiron in here. Look at this for next month right here. Look at how many planets we have in this grand trine. And at 12 noon p.m. in Rapid City, Jupiter will be at 454 Cancer, Saturn at 454 Scorpio, and Neptune at 458 Pisces. Now, I like to draw zero Aries houses sometimes, because when you put it in the natural house by sign, put the signs in their natural houses, it can help you orientate the interpretation of it. And especially for any of you who may be beginners, sometimes that's a way to study things, especially when I do transit to transit forecasting. Well, a midheaven in one place and an ascendant in another place, it switches all over. Yes, you can do it by major cities. I do a lot of forecasting for people all over the world, so I make all my new moon, full moon charts generic by 0 degrees Aries, because then I can really go in and focus on the aspect and the signs. So this Jupiter only makes 1 waxing trine to Neptune in Pisces. And it is on July 17th, but that's the same day It's making the first trine to Saturn, and Saturn's making its last of 3 waning trines to Neptune. So remember me saying there's so much water that's going on? You can kind of plan on that date if you want to either just be extremely happy, extremely sad, and everybody else around you could be one of those extremes. Who knows what will be going on? For all of us, it really will be about allowing ourselves to feel, to get in touch with everything. The moon's conjunct that north node there. It's going to be the moon's new phase to Saturn. So there's some emotional courage we're going to have to be looking for. One of the things that's going to happen with Jupiter in Cancer is the United States has Sun in Cancer. And we'll really notice this in the United States or any countries that have a lot of Cancer in their charts. Cancer can get very nationalistic. It can get very emotionally protective. Think of the United States, we call it mom and apple pie. That's that Cancer archetype. So one of the distortions that we can see from Jupiter in Cancer is too much emotional protectionism. There's going to be some parents that are going to have to be careful. They're just not going to want to let their children out of their sight for some reason. And again, that's going to be reflective of the degree to which we have internal security and self-trust. If the parent doesn't have it, they're not going to be able to give that to the child. They're going to have to control everything with the child. Yes, honey?
Well, I just wanted to say that the conservatives call all that you're describing the family values mantra. And that's strong in the USA chart, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Extremely strong in that. And we'll see some uprising of that in some way. And it's quite possible, you know, with the T-square that Jupiter's in with Uranus and Pluto, there could be some type of uprising, some tensions, whether they be natural events or whether they be country-to-country events, as I'm going to call our not getting along with each other. That type of stuff can be going on. That can make us very, again, any country, we're all going to be experiencing Jupiter in Cancer, so every country can be quite nationalistic here going on. And so it behooves us to make the efforts with these grand trines that we're going to have going on here over the next year with the Jupiter aspects to Saturn and Chiron to really make that effort to see community on the largest ability possible. Because again, Jupiter with its retrograde is going to be hanging out opposite Pluto and pointing to community. So can we create global community? Can we find a way to get along with our neighbors rather than drawing lines in the sand with them? Time will tell. We'll see. We'll find out. So again, next month, July 17th, is when we're going to have this beautiful grand trine going on. And, you know, the distortions of water, one of the biggest distortions of water is laziness. Because water just goes wherever until it has a container. That's why water and earth are together on the 4 elements, okay? Water can just float. We can be emotionally lazy with these grand trines. And so make that emotional effort, whatever it is of you that's required on a personal level. Let me move on here and a little faster. These are Jupiter's waning trines to Saturn in Scorpio. These are the dates and the degrees, as you can see. Now Jupiter's been in a 20-year cycle with Saturn, and as it makes these waning trines, for the most part, they will either bring a lot of societal rewards or rewards with family, rewards with relationships, things smoothing together outside of ourselves, or if we've not been paying attention to reality, if we have not been recognizing the deeper meanings of things that are going on in our life, what we can have with these waning trines is just being emotionally eclipsed, the couch potato emotionally, all right, or just really sinking into some types of emotional depression. Jupiter in Cancer, that emotional withdrawal. We can all go through cycles of emotional funks. And if we're not Jupiter processing and pondering and questioning what does it mean, why is it happening, then we can remain in that funk. Now, waning trines are outer rewards. So, during those aspects, this is a time period to be bringing the rewards in. And if you're not, then what did I not pay attention to? And Jupiter and Saturn had their oppositions, if I'm remembering correctly. They had their oppositions back in 2009, 2010, and Saturn was in Virgo and Jupiter was in Pisces. So just think back to a couple of years ago. What were some of the Jupiter and Virgo details in your life you weren't paying attention to? That could be part of what would be on melting down at this point if you did not make the efforts at the oppositions. All right, I'm going to go through these fast. Thank you for allowing me to do that. I want to make sure I get through all my slides. The Jupiter oppositions to Capricorn, or Pluto in Capricorn. Here's Jupiter sitting on the polarity point of Capricorn. And any of you who listen to my podcast, you hear me say that all the have versus have-nots, all that Capricorn authoritarian and control, and all of the dichotomies we have between the resources upon the planet. One of the ways to move through that and address that Cancer polarity, is community. Jupiter in Cancer is going to have all of us wanting to be touchy-feely with our communities, be it the neighbors that we have around us, be it our family, be it our spiritual communities. That's another great one with Jupiter in Cancer, is where's your spiritual family? And it's time to connect in with all of them. And so as Jupiter makes those oppositions to Pluto, this can be a time period to reach out there for that sense of community with people. Or Jupiter could go through an isolation from everybody else. The distortions of the Jupiter-Pluto oppositions is Jupiter in Cancer thinking that their God's better, the family values thing, the real fundamental or conservative religious movements can just want to throw themselves away and isolate themselves from anybody else. We could see a lot of religious fanaticism with Jupiter in Cancer on a collective level. Because again, those emotional extremes that we can have going on, and as Jupiter makes those oppositions to Pluto, it's going to be making the T-square, or Uranus in Aries, it'd be making the T-square to that. So the combination of the Jupiter, Uranus, Pluto T-squares is it can keep undermining security for all of us on a collective level. We can feel a collective angst. We can feel a collective insecurity. The world doesn't feel safe right now. Who knows what will happen with the rest of the Uranus-Pluto squares? Jupiter can magnify that and have us feel, again, more insecure. And when that happens, then whoever we have as our community, as our little group, whoever we feel emotionally safe with, whoever feels that like-minded with us in regards to beliefs, then those are the people we're going to be reaching for in order to find a sense of security through this T-square that's going to come 3 times on planet Earth with these Jupiter, Uranus, Pluto aspects. So again, on a collective level, I really see that there can be even more religious fanaticism. And what is terrorism? Most of it's done in the name of God. What is war? Most of it's done in the name of human-made distortions around religious conditionings. I think that the Jupiter, Uranus, Pluto T-squares, it can very easily magnify that stuff. The question becomes, will the grand trines with Jupiter, Chiron, and Saturn be enough to ease that energy up, or will the grand trines feed that energy? I don't know. Time will tell. I'm not a predictor. I forecast, yes. Predictions, not so much. I think that a lot of it could be religious based or financially based. I think those are the two areas where we could really see upsets, meltdowns, insecurities, changes. There's lots of opportunities for change as this stuff comes around. Now, Jupiter makes the waxing squares to Uranus, and EA is always taught that Aries to Uranus is the original anxiety from the womb. Again, Aries is that birth moment, and Cancer is that internalization of security. And if we didn't have that in our early environment, then we've been conditioned to carry it with us into life, to carry it with us out into the world. And the way our world is today, we don't teach internal security. We don't teach natural laws. So these Jupiter waxing squares to Uranus can amplify insecurity on a personal level. It'll amplify it on a collective level. And the waxing square, the purpose of that is going to be, can we reach for the next level of internalized security? Can we reach for that next level of self-trust, especially as Uranus in Aries bringing up all the changes in the world and all the things that we are having to go through in the world. Uranus in Aries is going to bring changes a lot faster than we can even keep up with them. It's just barely getting started in its new cycle. And so we have to then, that Cancer 90-degree mark from Aries, we've got to internalize security to be okay with everything that changes out there in the world all the time for us. Jupiter makes 3 waxing trines to Chiron. This is where we can look at any sense of our woundings and work to really self-heal on emotional levels. I always say trines are couch potato aspects, but the smallest effort brings the biggest rewards. And so make the effort with Jupiter and Cancer as it relates to Chiron to always be working for healing. How do I need to heal? How do I need to ground? Where do I feel the victim? Where do I feel a sense of everybody has it but me? Where do I feel out of control? Where do I feel the universe is just whirling all around me? How do I ground myself emotionally? How do I feel? How do I feel? Really working with a lot of that. This is a beautiful aspect for healers. Anybody who's in any type of healing profession, this is a great aspect to really be practicing, to be taking your craft and your tools out there to people. There's a lot of progress that can be made in the healing arts with these aspects. And so practice, do your work. Move through helping people and yourself as much as you can. Jupiter will make the waxing sesquisquadrates to Neptune. Now remember I said next month, July 17th of 2013, Jupiter makes 1 waxing trine to Neptune. That's that grand trine chart we looked at. Then it moves on to make the square and a half to Neptune 3 times. And that's moving from the first quarter phase to the gibbous phase. And this aspect will have us doing a lot of internal emotional searching. And this one might be, it's going to be a little more work to recognize what's going on emotionally whenever we have these aspects. Because Neptune in Pisces, it's in its own sign, it's quite deep. And it's going to be going to our wounding on the deepest levels possible in this and every lifetime. And so those wounds will be made conscious via Jupiter and Cancer. We're going to have these emotions that are changing as fast as the moon changes signs. And so Jupiter is going to be the key, the tool to go, well, what does this mean? Well, what does that mean? Why am I feeling this way? That waxing sesquisquadrate, that 135-degree mark, that is where we start that shift into the internal looking process at ourselves. And what changes and adjustments do we have to make in order to relate to the world outside of ourselves? So with these Jupiter-Neptune aspects, you must be careful about a re-imprinting of any sense of victimization and wounding. What you need to look at, the 135-degree mark is 15 degrees Leo in the natural zodiac. And what you need to really be looking at is, what's my role in this? What is my role in the play? How did I co-create this? How did I draw this to me? I want to be aware, Jupiter. I want to understand why I'm drawing in these situations. Why do I feel like I do in my environment? And asking those types of questions, and the tension of the shift from a yang phase to a yin phase, first quarter to gibbous, it's a great opportunity for us to be able to have that type of information come to the surface with Jupiter in Cancer, and make the shift. And make the shift to how we want to be a co-creator on planet Earth. All right, Leroy, I've got United States charts up. I'm going to move into a little more collective stuff. I'm trying to be conscious of time here. Oh, I'm not doing too bad.
No.
Why don't you check in, and were there questions that you thought I might want to ask her?
Well, actually, we've been private messaging with several of the attendees. I've been enjoying that.
Okay.
I really wanted to get another poll question answered here, just to get the interactivity of our webinar here. Let's try this. This is a curious question that I want a little clarity on. What type of device are you participating in tonight? So we'll leave that open for about a minute. So inviting all of the participants to declare their device. Nowadays we have lots of choices. Uranus and Aries getting more and more every day.
I'm on my laptop, and as Leroy is doing that, I'll do something for all of you. This is my reading room. This is my office where I do my readings with clients. And if anybody, any of you know Verta Luz, Verta Luz did this lovely, lovely painting for us on the wall of my office. And so this is where I see my clients over the phone. And this is also where I see live clients when they come and visit the house. And so now you can see what my little office is like. And I'll do something for you. I'll do one more thing for you. I usually have all of my little office stuff sitting where my laptop is. And so you're going to see all my office stuff. But this is out my view out my window.
That's nice. Occasionally on the podcast, you'll know Kim Marie is near the window, and the window's open in the spring because you'll hear the various chimes go off.
Oh, I have a collection of wind chimes that I've purchased or that have been given to me as gifts over the years, and they're all outside my reading office window.
So Kim, what I'm doing now to the attendees is showing the results of the poll, and laptop computer, far away the go away winner. 3 out of 4 people tonight are participating on their laptops. It just goes to show you how we're moving towards portability. I might be 1 out of 4 on a desktop. So no iPad, tablet, or smartphone folks yet, but those days are coming.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Media Monk.
Okay, you should be able to share again, and you have control of the screen now. Yep.
All right, so this is the second PowerPoint presentation I've ever done in my life. And I just taught myself by going in and clicking. And so if you can see this screen, I got the chart of the United States, and I have the transits for July 21st of this year. And you can see just barely, this is where I want to learn. I drew in my own aspects, and I couldn't figure out how to make it a bright red big fat bar. So hopefully you can see this right now. One of the things that we will be doing this fall with our webinar conference and Robert Gover is he just happens to use the Gemini chart as well, but he thinks both charts work. And so this is the U.S. Gemini chart, the Gemini rising with the 2:17 a.m. in the morning. And here is the U.S. Sibley chart, which is another very popular chart for the United States. And this one is at 5:10 p.m. in the afternoon. And what I've drawn in both of these charts is the United States. Everybody knows that the U.S., or many people are familiar with the fact that the U.S. has a Sun-Saturn square. And what we don't always recognize is that there's a T-square with Chiron when you draw a Chiron in on the chart. And what we have happening over the next few years is the fact that Pluto will be making oppositions to the U.S. Sun. Uranus will be making oppositions to the U.S. Saturn. And so the Uranus-Pluto squares will be making a grand cross to the U.S. Saturn and Sun. And what we have going on in these charts then is the fact that Jupiter will be starting to come in on the picture, and Jupiter will make the conjunctions to the U.S. Sun, squares to the Saturn, and it will even make 3 squares to Chiron. So I'm gonna leave it to Robert this fall when he does one of his webinars for one of his lectures for us. He's going to explain why both of these charts work and the history of a lot of how the United States came to draw up the Constitution and everything. International listeners, I thank you for allowing us to participate with the United States chart being a center of attention so much. As Pluto continues to waning phase, waning conjunct natal Pluto, the U.S. is going to continue to have to go through its learning curve of being, what will we say, one of the crowd. It will have to learn how to play its part in the play and not direct the play so much anymore on the world stage. That's going to continue to happen, I think. But what I wanted to just draw to your attention here, I drew it up for the Jupiter return. No matter which of the charts you use, there is going to be one Jupiter return to natal Jupiter in the United States chart. We'll have Mars there at the same time. You can see Mercury will be barely finishing up its retrograde cycle, I think. Yeah, it's not retrograde anymore. So there's a lot of dynamics that's going to go on in the cardinal quadrant, regardless of what chart system you use. So now what I want to do is I want to just run you by some aspects, and I chose to do the Gemini chart. That's the one that I use the most. The sun is off a little bit, and of course the moon's off several degrees, but otherwise most of the other planets by degree and minutes are pretty much the same no matter which chart you use, Gemini or Sibley. But just glance at this, and again, we'll post this for later. What I really want you to look at for right now is just get a glimpse of the year as we're going through. This is Jupiter hits to the U.S. Gemini chart. And so again, 3 times conjuncts the Sun, 3 times squares Saturn, 3 times squares Chiron throughout 2013, 2014. Next. This is the Uranus and Pluto grand crosses to the chart, where again, Pluto is not only going to oppose the Sun, it is also going to square Saturn. Uranus squares the Sun, opposes Saturn. Look at the dates, 2014, 2015. Just looking at Jupiter, Uranus, and Pluto's hits to the United States charts, these are squares and oppositions. This is just looking at these dates alone is telling you, oh my gosh, there's a lot of hits to come to the United States chart. This is the chart of the Federal Reserve. I'm going to go through a few things a little fast, and then I'm going to bring through some of my closing comments and open this up. When you look at the Federal Reserve chart, and just briefly, the Federal Reserve is December 23rd, 1913, 6:02 p.m., Washington, D.C. Was signed into a law by Woodrow Wilson, and it was rushed through right under the gun before the holiday on purpose, before Christmas holiday. And for those of you who don't know it, the Federal Reserve Board is a privately owned banking consortium. Our Federal Reserve that we talk about here in the United States, it is not owned by the federal government. It is a private board, and we will speak more detail to this in our webinar this fall. It's just, what I want you to see is the fact that look at the 0 degrees to 1 degree Cancer Capricorn hits. So Jupiter's going to be along here. If you remember some of those earlier charts when we're going to have all those planets in the early degrees of the cardinal, or excuse me, of the water signs and the cardinal signs, you can see there's going to be a lot of aspects going on here. So as I look at this Federal Reserve chart, it's going to get its hits June, July of 2013, right here. And then we're going to get to June, July of 2014, and this is where all of these hits are going to come. It happens to be that Jupiter will go over the ascendant of the Federal Reserve 3 times. It will go over Mars 3 times throughout the course of the year. And then again, June, July of 2014, it's when it will hit this Jupiter-Neptune aspect that we have going on. What I want to start to say now for everybody is I think that Jupiter in Cancer on a collective level will play a very important role in regards to our economy, our financial structures, and how we really deal with resources. And if you have a background in evolutionary astrology, you know that many times we will use matriarchal versus patriarchal principles. Patriarchal principles are based upon exclusion, me versus them, have versus have not. Matriarchal principles are based upon inclusion, sharing, giving, receiving. And it's hard to not be aware that we've had an overabundance and ruling of patriarchal principles on the planet. We're starting to see more and more talk and conversation of recognizing that planet Earth is alive. Oh, I remembered a tidbit. Roy was reading some things this week, and he read something by Dane Rudier about Cancer. And Dane Rudier thought that the Cancer archetype really related to Mother Earth, and the fact that even if man has his head in the clouds, or men and women have their head in the clouds and the stars, we all have our feet on planet Earth. We're all grounded by the Earth. And yes, Earth is Taurus, but I thought that was a really kind of interesting comment by Dane Rudier, and Roy may know it better than me and may correct me on it, but I just really feel that this Jupiter in Cancer is a time period where we're either going to choose to be a community of one, or we're going to draw all these lines in the sand with everything and other countries. And what war are we going to start next? How much longer are we going to realize in the United States that we can't, bankroll all the wars? So I think that Jupiter in that T-square with Uranus-Pluto will be extremely important in waking people up to values, to recognizing on an emotional level that we're better together. We better take care of each other, be it our neighbors across the street, be it our spiritual communities, be it our countries, and on the broadest level, the global one. And so it'll be real interesting over this next year with Jupiter in Cancer to see how that comes out on a public level in various ways with the media. because of the United States chart with all that Cancer, Capricorn, Libra, Aries, because of the cardinal quadrant in the U.S. charts that we have going on, and in the Federal Reserve chart, Jupiter in Cancer is going to hit a lot of that stuff. And I think there's going to be, and with all these hit lists that I just showed you, there's going to be a lot of choice points now coming through. Jupiter, that recognition, that waking up. Oh, we're better together. Cancer. Oh my gosh, we've got to take care of each other. Cancer. I think there's a lot of choice points that are going to come up for the United States, and what happens in the U.S. many times has its rippling effect across the whole world. So with both the U.S. chart and the Federal Reserve chart, I did not show you all the hits to the Federal Reserve chart. I can do those later, or I'll do those in a future lecture.
Maybe,
working specifically on money. Go ahead.
Kim, I just wanted to respond to that. Maybe the key for the U.S. chart and whatever comes of these hits, these Jupiter hits, is to the degree that we become more of a responsive country to other countries. Responsive, but not domineering.
Yes.
Yet, also, insist upon our right to privacy and inner peace, as well as we honor that right in other countries and other peoples across the globe. Will be to the
That'll
degree
go on.
that,
Yeah. That can go on here in the U.S. with all the privacy rights that we have going on.
Right.
Everything. I mean, the whole Constitution is up for review as long as we have Pluto waning phase to natal Pluto. But again, because of the Fed's chart and the history of monetary policies in the United States, I think there's so much that we're primed to needing to learn on a financial level, and there's going to be some financial things that are going to be coming along that may not be the nicest. And so any of you who know me know that I am always advocating money for all of us, resources for everybody. And these are two of my favorite websites. And of course, if any of you know who Ellen Brown is, her Web of Debt, it's been published, republished. I think it first came out in like 2008. It's been republished again. And The Public Bank Solution, this is her latest book coming out. She replaced the title. It was going to be The Buck, B-U-C-K, Starts Here, as in the dollar starts here, but she switched it to The Public Bank Solution. She is taking orders for it on her website, webofdebt.com. I just can't advocate enough that if you care about resources for everybody and everybody having an equitable chance on the planet, educate yourself to Ellen Brown's work. Now, the Public Banking Institute is U.S. based, but between both of her websites, there's lots of information internationally as to what countries have more public banking systems versus private banking systems. Public banking systems is usually when the government prints the money and it can loan it out at zero or near zero interest rates to people. Private banking interests, such as the United States Federal Reserve, well, the Federal Reserve will loan money directly to the banks at less than 1%. But here we are, the United States, starting to double interest rates for students. Ellen Brown just came out with a new article on truthout.org about comparing all the other countries and how they pay for college educations. And of course, in a lot of the European, Scandinavian countries, it's free. And in places like Australia, and I don't remember some of the other countries, I mean, almost free, almost nothing. And so it behooves each of us to really learn how monetary policies are made and governed in whatever country we live in. And Jupiter in Cancer is going to oppose Pluto and square Uranus in every single country's chart. And so all of us are going to find ourselves at choice points of whether we want what's best for all of us, or it's only for certain few. So thank you. I think I've probably spoken enough individual details about Jupiter and Cancer, and you'll have this for review. I'm trying to just barely touch upon the collective part because I feel sensitive about being on my soapbox.
Well, Jupiter is one of the money archetypes, so you had to cover it.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And it's going to continue to be in everybody's attention. And no matter what they say in the United States, that recovery's here. If you're an astrologer, you go, oh yeah, I'll believe it when I see it.
I have a tidbit for you, Kim, before we close.
Mm-hmm.
A great American, Neil Armstrong. I read today in some of the readings that I had been guided to that he was indeed the first man to land upon the moon. He has Jupiter in Cancer, but also Moon in Sag. So the mutual reception of those two archetypes. Tell me that's not a great symbol for lunar exploration.
Lunar exploration.
Yeah. Of course, we're talking more about the emotional explorations of Jupiter and Cancer, but I thought I'd point that one out as a tidbit on the way out.
Hey, there isn't a one of us who isn't going to be doing lunar explorations with Jupiter and Cancer. We're just going to be doing an internalization of them.
Right.
So, Media Monk, any other comments you want to bring in? Any questions or comments from anybody else?
Well, I feel pretty complete. 3 minutes to the top of the hour. Just wanted to remind everybody that yes, we will enhance, edit, and post this recording on our YouTube channel. Stay tuned to our newsletters, our weekly newsletters, for more details about that. We had a couple of attendees also wanted to have the slides of the presentation. We'll make those available. Again, details forthcoming. So thank you, Kim Marie. You did a great job as we hustled through the first webinar at EAN. So congratulations, honey.
Thank you, Leroy, for being able to handle all that technical stuff. And thank you to everyone for being so interested in this as we start out teaching in this manner. So,
as you know, go to www.evolutionaryastrology.net for more information. You can always call Kim Marie or Leroy toll free 1-877-348-5111. And just like on our weekly podcasts, until next time, move with joy and passion on your own personal journey to the core of your soul.
Thank you, everyone.